Right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on with today's meeting, which is the Executive Pensions Committee on the 27th of March 2025. We'll start off, I believe, with apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. None received.
Thank you. I will just mention that after we'll go through and complete the agenda 1 to 9, and then we'll do the consideration of exempt information. After that, we'll just break for 5 or 10 minutes because anybody that councillors that are not standing and not likely to be here next year, they can leave after that if they wish, or if they're really keen, they can stay for the train. So we'll do that, and then if there's any other board members that are not here, I'll give them a chance to come in. And we'll crack on then. We'll go with the agenda item 2, which is the declaration of members' interest. We know where we are with that.
There you go. Depends on active member of the pension fund.
Oh,
No one I'm drawing off the pension fund.
yeah, active member of the pension fund. Yeah,
Active member of the pension fund.
well, that's what the mark.
Receipt of an LCC pension. Don't know whether that's an active member of the pension fund, but it probably is as well.
No. Thank you very much. So agenda item 3, which is the minute from the previous meeting on the 16th of January. We've got those on pages 5 to 10. I'll not go through each page, but anybody that doesn't agree that that's the true form of what we went through on that day? Paul?
Can I just abstain? No.
Certainly. We'll take those as read.
Read.
Yep. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the report by the independent chair. And move over to George Graham there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take most of the report as read. I think things I want to highlight are in paragraph 3.2, the areas where the board would like to see further progress. Specifically, the development of a comprehensive plan to ultimately eliminate processing backlogs. Further assurance around the ability of the software suppliers to deliver the software necessary to implement the cloud remedy. This isn't a Lincolnshire issue specifically or a West Yorkshire issue specifically. This is an industry-wide issue, but it's clearly a significant risk for the fund. And on a more minor level, I suppose, some changes to the way in which data quality information is presented so that we can actually draw a line under the legacy issues and see that the data quality strategy is actually delivering improvements in the areas it can deliver improvements. So those are the things I particularly want to draw the committee's attention to, Chair. Happy to take any question.
Right, Tom,
Apologies, Chairman.
yes, George. Yeah, we've got to come back on them.
I think if I can wait and see how it's covered by Matt in his report, and then if there's any further questions on that, I'll come back then if that's okay.
Okay. George. Agenda item 5, which is pension fund update report. Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the standard quarterly update paper. Has one recommendation that the committee consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. The Key points that I'd just like to highlight are paragraph 1.9 on page 17, updating the committee on the funding level with the actuaries report attached to Appendix C. This shows how the funding level has increased slightly over the quarter to 99%, as at 31st of December on the roll forward basis. Obviously, the further we get from the valuation period, the less accurate that is, but we have the new valuation starting as at 31st of March this year. The actuary will be presenting a session on the 2025 valuation later in this meeting. Section 2 updates the committee on any breaches that have occurred over the quarter, with the breaches over the year shown in Appendix D. Process has been reviewed since the last meeting, and the breaches register has been expanded to provide more detail. There have been some changes to the risk register too, which is shown in section 3 on page 18. We've added a new risk on local government reorganisation, because whatever the outcome, there will be some impact on the pension fund. And we've also increased the likelihood of reduction in the overall knowledge of the committee because of the upcoming elections and potential changes that might happen to the makeup of that committee. And we've added an additional control with a full day's training booked in for June to try and bring any new members and existing members as a refresh, to bring new members up to speed as quickly as we are able to. Section 4 updates the committee on activity with Boards to Coast and the partner funds. The last joint committee was held earlier this week on the 25th of March, and the agenda for that is set out on paragraph 4.9. And section 5 on page 21 gives an update on the transition from Northern Trust to CEAS. Pleased to report all is going smoothly and we're on track for that transition to be effective from the 1st of April. And then finally at section 6, there's an opportunity for any members of the committee to discuss any training events that they've undertaken since the last meeting. And just a reminder that we include any training opportunities available for everyone to attend in the weekly email that goes out on a Monday. So that was all I was going to say, and I'll happily take any questions. Thank you.
Question.
On the reorganisation, it's probably too early to tell, but if say it ended up with, you know, a two split approach, is it likely the fund would also have to split on that approach, or is it likely the fund would stay intact?
It's expected that the fund would stay intact. So an example of where that's happened was the local government reorganisation in Cumbria, which split into two unitary authorities. The decision that needs to be made there is which unitary is the administering authority, but the Cumbria Pension Fund is still Cumbria and still covers both unitaries. The slightly added interest we have is that some of the proposals being put forward cover the North East and the North Lincolnshire funds, which are both in the East Riding Pension Fund. So if it's the two unit, well, if it's the, depending on which option is, if it's the option where they are a separate unitary and Lincolnshire remains as is, but as a unitary, then that wouldn't impact the pension fund other than all the work that has to be done behind the scenes in the reorganisation of employers and members' records. If it was one of the options where those two unitaries are brought in with districts to create a new unitary, then there will have to be further discussion as to how that impacts both the East Riding Pension Fund and the Lincolnshire Pension Fund and what's the best result going forward. There's a number of different things that could happen. The members could move from East Riding into the Lincolnshire Fund or the other way, which would reduce the size of the Lincolnshire Fund, and we're about half the size of East Riding. Or we could merge pension funds, which is another thing that's on the government's agendas at some point. So it's all up in the air, really. But we're just keeping a close eye on it, obviously working with the council to ensure that any pensions implications are understood.
Anyone else? Okay, we've got a recommendation there. The committee consider and discuss with all. We have to do this information required. I think we've covered that. Happy with that? Yeah. Moving on, agenda item 6, which is the pension administration's report. 1st of October to 1st December last year. the maps.
Thank you, Chair.
Through on that.
Morning, everybody. So this is the report, the admin report from West Yorkshire, 1st of October to the 31st December 24. The first point is about the performance and benchmarking, referred to as key performance indicators, KPIs. Broadly, it's a good message. We are hitting the targets or exceeding targets across a range of our performances. There are some that we don't meet, and these are on page 40 with an explanation of the reasons why. If there's any good news in this, there is no surprise that we haven't met these. There's significant reasons why. The current software doesn't have the current capability to produce calculations for a suite of transfers within LGPS called interfunds, which means that we have to rely on manual calculations and spreadsheets. And there has to be 2 calculations performed now at each step, because we have to provide the current values as they were under the regulations, and a second value under the age discrimination regulations, often referred to as McLeod remedy. So we have to produce 2 manual calculations. That slows the process down, and is the reason why that we're not meeting those targets at the moment. There are some other issues in there. Deferred benefits set up on leaving. I'd like to stress that we meet statutory requirements. We write to a member as they leave employment and the fund to tell them they have benefits deferred until retirement age. However, we don't send them a set of figures. That set of figures comes somewhat later. We must send that initial letter within 2 months of receiving all the information of the date of leaving, whichever is first. The issue is that we've had a lot of backlogs that were in a number of leavers across Lincolnshire's fund. And because there's no payments or benefits involved, it tends to be a lower priority. You'll see that the second column on the right is actually a number 1, 2, or 3. It's a 3rd priority level, so that we can put that down and process retirements or the interfunds, whatever we might need to do. We have been doing some work on deferreds in general, and I'll come on to that a bit later. There is some automation there that's improving the results. And the last one that didn't quite meet 99.63% success rate, it was just a couple of forms. We'll keep an eye on that. It's probably volumes. Staffing, point 2, actually pretty good. We actually, at this point in time, we're fully staffed. We have a rolling recruitment program. We are replacing officers that leave, and we are also extending the number of posts that we have. So that's been quite good. Resourcing, George has already touched upon that. Backlogs are an issue, partly down to volumes of work, partly down to the remedy, partly down to our system has slowed things down. And last year, the Government Action Department pulled some factors which prevented us from processing certain elements of the work. And they were actually hit for months, so that created a backlog as well. So we are recruiting, as I said, additional posts to be able to remove these backlogs. We're talking to sixth form colleges, working with maths colleges, and trying to introduce a graduate scheme so that we are getting youngsters here, starting afresh, like their numbers, like their maths, and are interested in career in pensions. Last year, I think we had 3 graduates. This year, we've got 4 places. We advertised for those 4 places. We had 400 applicants and had to close the process. We're quite pleased with that. And it might be because we're paying, as I understand it, a national graduate salary, which is quite a bit higher than what we would be expected to pay usually in Bradford, in West Yorkshire. So I'm quite confident we'll have some good quality staff next year on the graduate scheme. We have got a bit of a blind spot. We struggle to recruit senior pension officers. These are the people that would move from, say, perhaps mostly processing to a mixture of processing and checking as they gain experience. We've exhausted that skill set and experience, and we have struggled to recruit to that role. So what we've done is we've actually recruited additional pensions officers. So we expect to, train the experience, grow the experience within, and then promote these into senior pension officers as time goes by. We've had an audit about annual benefit statements. It's come back as good, so nothing undue to report there, which is good. And looking at point 2.8 shared service budget, we are on course for a £19.97 per head cost. Shared service risk register has been updated to reflect all our partners now signing or re-signing their contracts or SLAs. We've also reviewed risk register in terms of volumes and backlogs. That's an amber, and we've added some words to reflect the challenge that we have to meet. Going on pensions dashboard, so that's point 2.13. I'm sure you're aware of pension dashboard, big ticket item of this government and the previous one, to give the general public some sight and knowledge of the pension benefits that they might be entitled to when they retire. Not just local government, but all of the public sector and all of the private sector. This year, however many schemes are in the country, thousands and thousands will sign up to this dashboard, and simply their current pension values will be there. Now, if the member doesn't know or isn't aware of where their administrator is, or even who the former employer was, or who their scheme is, because they may have moved around, left the country, come back, whatever, they can go onto this dashboard, they can put in their personal information as required, and it will bring up their provider, the provider's contact detail, the administrator, the scheme name, and all of that sort of stuff. We've been doing very well on this. We've been working with the TPR for the last couple of years. I think we're on our third year now. They've been quite impressed with what we've done. We have got an ISP provider, or an integrated service provider called Bravura, and they're sort of a security, because you'd be worried about your scheme members' data going online. So we don't put all the data online. We put some of the data, i.e. what is required, the value of an annual benefit statement, an ABC value, contact details for us and Lincolnshire, would all go to Bravura. And once they get those personal matching criteria coming from the request from the member, they will verify it. If it's correct, they'll open the door and they'll allow them to see just that set of information. So we still retain full data on our service, fully protected. So they can only see annual benefit statements, but of course they can contact us and ask for further information. We've had some matching criteria refined since Christmas, so we're looking at that, and we've done some data tests with Bravura. The private sector is likely to go live in April. The public sector, including ourselves, will go live in October. There's a lot of testing to be done by then. The public, I should hasten to add, do not get access to this dashboard until 2026, likely to be April or after. That's yet to be confirmed. That's my personal opinion, it'd be April after. I think in the legislation and the guidance, I think it says something about 6 months. So we get an opportunity to test how the dashboard works with that data that we put on there, with our ISP provider, with the data that we have provided by the fund's employers. The testing of that data, and I'm going off a little bit off piece here, is not going to be by us or by Lincolnshire or by Lincolnshire employers. They're going to be some independent testing groups employed by the Pension Dashboard Programme to undertake this task. And once we've had that full feedback and audit of that process, then we will be able to go live. I think that was me going off piece. I've covered all of that. Yeah, hand in hand with that, we have got this live chat that goes straight into our call centre. It was launched last month. I haven't got any figures on that at the moment and how successful, but I'll bring those back to the future boards or committees. We also have a portal for members to look at all their benefits at Lincolnshire held at West Yorkshire Pension Fund. It's called Byte Pension. It was originally produced in conjunction with Civica. We have developed our own product and we're doing some sort of testing on that at the moment. We hope to launch that soon. 2.37. Again, this is what George referred to as Civica and sort of a global problem in their capability to deliver the new requirements under the cloud and remedy. And it has been a challenge. And we can see from 2.37, we used to get 4 to 6 releases a year. We've had about 40 releases. This is 40 releases that adds new screens for new data, that amends processes, amends calculations, so on and so forth. And we did have an issue, I think it's fair to say, earlier this year, where we had to have 19 releases in before the end of the financial year. we had to take the system down. We took the system down for 3 days in the end. We thought it might have been 8. And it was as successful as we expected it to be. In other words, the calculations that we expected were there. I mean, as I said earlier, we don't have the interfunds and the linkings, etc., that fails in our KPIs, but we have most of the others. There was further issue that the member portal, so which I was speaking about earlier, went down, and so did the employer portal, where a lot of your employers will provide us with information. I think the biggest issue, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong here, is our communication was really quite poor. It was 1 minute to midnight. It could have been done a lot better. There has been some significant conversations before the downtime and after. That's internally, and of course, the collaboration board with our partners. So we apologise for any inconvenience, and I think there is definitely some lessons to be learned there. Civica, generally speaking, going to the wider point George making, really aren't out of the woods. I think there's some disappointment about how they've met this challenge for us and other clients. They certainly have some interest by our authority bodies, whether it's scheme advisory boards. I believe that, well, I know that the National Officer Group, which is a group of senior pensions officers, formerly known as the Technical Group, are inviting all software providers, because there are some issues with the others, to attend their meetings, and they will be contacting them with a list of their concerns and queries, and that should be happening in the next month or so. We are obviously having meetings with Civica about some of the issues. They don't just stop at calculations. There's some issues about provision of annual benefit statements going forward. I'll get that out there now, just so that you understand. We will be providing them, but it might not contain all of the McLeod information for all of the members, and we need to have a communication plan to achieve that. As for George's other points, I think I'm probably at the end of everything there. About a plan for the backlogs. We have had a retirement. The head of the service centre retired in December, and has now been replaced as a couple of weeks ago. The new head spoke to me this week, and he will be looking at these processes and backlogs to see if there's a way of identifying some of the older processes that we have, and identifying a way to speed up some of the processes or improve the process, including these interfaces that are failing. And the last one on the data quality, when I first made some inquiries a month or so ago, I think it must have been after the last committee and forward, I got a bit of a pushback. But this week in discussion, I know Claire was in that discussion, I've had some good news that we can split the legacy and the current data scores, which is, as George said, good for everybody. You'll see which of the poor data scores we inherited and which have fallen under our administration. And it's not going to happen this week or next week. I've been told it's complex, but then I get told that for everything. We will achieve it, and I hope at the next period I'm here, I think we bring the data scores there. So I'm hoping to have something updated. Yeah, even if it's not functioning by then, I hope to have a better update within the report. That's everything from me, I believe. Are there any questions?
I'll just mention one thing really. I really concerned with the downtime that we had, and I think the officers thought there'd been umbilical cord was cutting what was happening. I wouldn't want to see that happen again. It's a communication issue. I think it's vital, particularly for our officers, that we've got a flow. At the end of the day, we're your customer matter.
Yeah,
Please keep it happening.
absolutely right. Your customers and partners, and if I was in your shoes, I'd be jumping up and down and demanding more. So, I've got nowhere to hide with that. It was really poor. It was necessary, but we could have done such a better job and done it earlier to inform you.
So,
I've just got a couple, if that's okay. Just on that point, it was agreed that there would be a kind of a formal review of the project planning around the updates, and the communication planning was the biggest thing. I just wondered if there'd been any update on that, just because, you know, obviously the lessons learned from that review need to be shared with us as to what will be put in place so that doesn't happen again going forwards. And the second question, it wouldn't be one of these meetings if I didn't ask branding. I know it was agreed at the January joint advisory group that you could go ahead and start a project looking at that. I just wondered if there was any update on anything that had happened there yet.
I've not got an update on either of those, but if you'd like me to go away and ask, and then I'll drop you an email and then it can be shared. Is that
Yes,
all right?
please. Yes, please.
Yeah. I also think the banding issue is an important. Let's see it's a fruition, right? But I will look forward to something coming in the post that makes it quite clear to me that what's coming is relevant to my membership of the Lincolnshire Pension Fund, if at all possible. Because at the moment, you know, I keep on getting the West Yorkshire stuff. I know what it's all about and I can understand it, but God knows what most people think about it, to be honest. The particular question I've got is, and it's relevant to the comments that were made by George to a certain extent, with, you know, dealing with backlog issues, legacy issues. And one of the things that we've asked you at odd times over the past few years, particularly bearing in mind the difficulty it is in terms of recruiting staff and expanding organisations, is whether you've got any active wish to expand the partnership that's operated by taking new membership into it. The comment we've always got is that you're not actively seeking to do that, because I think, you know, you can manage what you've got in the partnership without having new members and new issues coming in that might frustrate the overall delivery. But I did notice in the risk register that it is a risk that's been identified. I don't know whether it's a high level, because I think your risk numbers are not really to do with the risk of the risk. But the comment that worried me is the risk is associated with being asked to tender for new business. And I wondered whether, because the answer to the risk is fairly, in my view, could be fairly simple. No, we're not taking on any new business at the moment, so the risk then disappears. But I just wondered whether, with the risk there in the way that you stated it, is there a legal reason why you can't simply say that to anybody that comes to ask you to tender for new business? Or is there still a wish, you know, somewhere in the organisation that, given the right opportunities, you would love to take on some new partners?
I you know, never say never is where I'm going to start, you know, because who knows how we're going to look in the future. Go back to the question that Joe had about, you know, LGPS reforms. Who knows what the future will look like? But right now, today, foreseeable future, I categorically say we're not looking for new business. To the best of my knowledge, we're not tendering for any business because we don't want it. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think you can see that we operate quite well. I hope you can see we operate quite well. But we have significant challenges, whether that's with backlogs, whether that's with data, whether that's recruitment and retention. They would only become bigger challenges if we brought in another partner or two with data in different formats, etc., etc. Considering then as well that we have cloud, the remedy to overcome and fully implement, and we have the system software issues to resolve with Civica, I don't think we are in the right place. You could even say we're not fit for purpose or further tendering of business. But whether that changes in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. It's never say never.
Well, I think that's the answer you've given us is very similar to the one that you gave us, you know, some time ago. The question I think that was sitting behind my thought process when I raised the issue is, can you confirm this? You can actually say to anybody that comes to you and says, would you tender for this work?
I think,
You can
yes,
say no.
I think we can say yes. Yes, we're not tendering. No, we're not going to tender because if we don't want the business, there's nothing that legally that says we can't. And then looking at that risk, I think possibly there's a good argument that you've made to have a look at that, to put something to update that and turn it green. But yes, we're not looking for business right now.
Yeah, because it's totally in your hands, that risk.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll have a look at that.
You happy, Mark? Finish?
Yes.
Yes. Steve?
Just going back to the budget and the table at 2.8, doesn't really tell me anything. Has this changed? Because I thought we'd looked at this before and got it changed to what the budget was for the current year and then what you're trading at. And then where the variances are. It's all got relating to 24, 25. It's just four figures at the end, which is obviously the current year. We're in. There's a lot of information back in 24, but that's not particularly relevant at the minute. And likewise, what we did for the 25, 26, because that's what we compared against it. Where do we think it's going to be? Where are we actually in?
Well, this is the report to December, so I think that the figures are relevant for this period. But I get your point. I think we used to provide further figures and we've reduced them at request. So I think perhaps Joel Clear better place to answer that.
If I recall, they used to show the whole shared service budget, and I think we said it was more useful to see the impact for Lincolnshire. But I think there was slightly different information previously. Perhaps we can take that away, and compare and just see if there is any way of perhaps presenting it in a slightly different format for you.
Point, Steve? Okay. Anyone else? Matt, when do you normally send the annual statement?
The annual benefit statements, they should be sent by the 31st of August of every year. We generally start sending them when we have all the employers' returns checked and they're balanced, so to speak, so that we could send them out anytime from the end of May through to the end of August, which just helps with any queries when they're here or our offices as well, because you don't want to have 50,000 annual benefit statements land on the same day and at least 10% of those pick up the phone. That's happened in the past in various places. Agreed. So we do it with all the rest of our partners, and once we start producing these, probably in May, we send them out about 2,000 a day.
Obviously, they're most important things for the members.
Yes.
You obviously have a feeling whether you miss anybody.
Sorry.
You do not miss anybody.
Right, absolutely, yes. We there will be the odd one or two, because there's just work that's being carried out and those values will be provided. Well, what I could clarify for you, Chairman, is the issue I did mention up front about the annual benefit statement linked back to Civica. The current figures of the member values will be sent out. But because we cannot at the moment, Civica cannot provide the software that will put on there the McLeod calculation, so the second one to see if they have increased benefits, that bit may be missing. It's not a material breach, so we don't have to discuss this with the pension regulator because there is a discretion that can be applied for that for this year. But we will need to do some better communications. But just to assure the committee, broadly speaking, the number of members affected by McLeod, affected positively, i.e. they would get a bit more pension, is probably sitting at less than 1% of your active and deferred membership, probably under 0.5%. So we can't dismiss these. They have a statutory right to have this information, but neither are we talking about thousands and thousands of people, and neither are we talking about thousands and thousands of pounds. It will be tends to a few hundred is usually the underpin uplift. Critical that we do it. So we will keep you informed of the progress, and we can bring back some various reports throughout the year.
George?
Chair, just on that, the discretion Matt mentions, in order to exercise it, the fund would need to take a specific decision that it was going to not provide certain information to certain classes of member as part of their ADS. So I suppose the question is, does the fund have a process to make the relevant decision, particularly given that there is no committee meeting between now and July? I think Joe would have to rely on Matt to provide it with the basis for the decision.
I think that would, so given that the April meeting has been cancelled, we would bring it to there if it needs to be. I would need to check our delegations because it may be something that as head of the pension fund, I can agree to. Just, I think the other really important point on that is that this was raised at a Tuesday shared service meeting. Because as a fund, we don't want a delay in those annual benefit statements going out. I think they're critical that people are used to receiving them at certain times. The other major impact that has is that if the annual benefit process isn't run, then the valuation data can't be run. And of course, it being a valuation year, it's critical that we get that to our actuary in good time to ensure we're able to get those rates calculated for our employers in good time. So there was discussion, I understand, at this week's meeting, which Claire substituted for me for. There's further meetings, I think, this week and next week to look at what might be done. And that will come back to the fund and we will be involved in that final decision. And for our fund, I would much rather it went out saying, you haven't got all the information this time because as the point that Matt made, there's very, very few people that it actually impacts. And when it does, it's not life-changing amounts. We have to get that information out to them, but I would much rather, I think our members would much rather have the information without that, and our valuation runs smoothly and our employees get their contribution rates in a timely manner. So absolutely, we'll be checking our delegations, but I think we'll absolutely be able to do that one way or another, because we could always get our executive director to agree to that if that is the requirement. But I think it's something that would probably be delegated to head of the fund.
Okay. Any more from Matt? Thank you, Matt. Got a recommendation here. The committee discussed the activity and performance of administration service the last quarter, which we can agree with it. We've done that. Okay. Agenda item 7 now, which is the pension policies review. I think, Joe, you're bringing that through.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. So this is just updating the committee on any changes that we've made to the main policies of the fund. And the recommendation is just that the committee consider and discuss the report. So we do an annual review of the key policies on a 3-yearly basis. So this review has covered the communications policy, the pensions administration strategy, the code of conduct and conflict of interest policy, and also the breaches reporting procedure. I've attached them all as appendices just to refresh the committee on them. However, there are no material changes, very minor changes, so there is no request for approval here. There's nothing, as I say, materially different from the last review that was taken. I don't intend on going through the policies in any detail, but I will happily take any questions. Thank you.
Questions on that? No.
It's keeping with the performance of this committee meeting. Have there been any breaches of the policies that we right?
Breaches of the policies.
Yeah.
No,
An action being required to be taken as a consequence. That's what.
no. Well, I mean, the pensions admin strategy obviously sets out what's expected of employers. So there will have been employers that haven't done what they've been expected to do. That gets reported where it's a breach of regulations through the breaches report as part of the fund update.
That seems to be simple things like.
So late.
It's not getting your payments on time and so on.
Yeah, so there haven't been any breaches on, for example, the code of conduct or no conflicts of interest that haven't been declared. There aren't really any breaches that can be done on the communications. That's really setting out what we do, how we ensure that we communicate, and that meets the requirements set out within the regs to be able to produce that. And the breaches reporting procedure just sets out everybody's responsibilities in respect of breaches. So we haven't had anything referred to either me as the head of the pension fund or to Andrew Crookham as the scheme manager.
And the policies in the sort of the sanctions that go, penalties if you don't get your payments in on time, after a couple of warning shots.
The admin strategy does say that, yes, you can be fined, and also when any employers are late, because that's an area of work that we do within our team on that monitoring. We're very clear when sending out emails telling people they've been late, what the consequences are, with the ultimate consequence being reported to the pensions regulator and then potentially some very large fines.
Information. Sure, following on from that, has any large fine ever been issued to anybody within our pension fund?
So the largest fine is probably around £4,000 that went to an employer that was repeatedly late with poorer quality data, and it took them quite a while to actually engage with us. So I won't name the employer, but yes, that's the largest. Generally, it's only very small amounts because we would much rather work with them than just come in hard. So Vita in the team, that's her job, managed by Josh, to ensure that we've got as good a relationship with our employers as we can. But sometimes if they are absolutely not doing anything and that goes on over a period of time, we will bring the big stick out and say I think that's the highest fine that we've had.
Clear on that? I've got a little recommendation there that we didn't consider the report. We've done after that. Move on to junior item 8, which is the Lincolnshire Pension Fund business plan. Again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this just brings the business plan to the committee, and we've changed it slightly so it now covers the business plan for the 3 years to 2027-28. Recommendation is that the committee report consider the report and approve the plan. So it's attached to Appendix A and it sets out the objectives of the fund, some statistics on our funding level and cash flow, the resources that we have, the budget. Then we look back at the progress from last year's business plan, how have we done in meeting those tasks set, and then what are the key tasks that we see at this time over the coming 3 years. It also sets out the main risks for the fund and then a forward plan with meetings for the coming year. So on a review of last year, there's been a lot of work done and generally progress on the key tasks has been good. And where tasks haven't progressed as we would have liked, that has been due to factors outside of our team's control. Key tasks set out on page 136 of the reporting pack. And then we will bring any updates and outcomes to the committee for information and approval as required. Forward plan is just looking at the expected meeting agendas, but just reminding you it is flexible and could be changed with additional training added, or it's a bit unknown as to where we're going ahead with the current LGPS changes and also LGR. So those plans may change and we will be flexible in adapting to those. So I'll happily take any questions. Thank you.
Just on the structure, I know you said on the principal account post you wanted a period before you look out the second one. Is there any sort of revised timescale on that, or?
So in looking at that, Josh was obviously appointed to the first one and is undertaking SIPFA, which takes quite a considerable time. And it also, given we have a very small team, takes a considerable amount of time for Claire as his manager to bring him up to speed in all that's required in the role. So the thought process is we'll actually leave it until Josh is further along in that training, and then when we bring someone new in, we might actually bring them in at a higher level. They might be part qualified, nearly there, fully qualified perhaps, we don't yet know. At this point in time, we're managing the workloads within the team. There's always more we can do, and I think going forward with the potential changes, that list is going to grow as to what's required of us. So probably within the next perhaps 18 months might be a consideration. It's something we keep under review though, and we discuss regularly as to is it yet the right time to go out for that additional post.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman. I was looking at the fees, well, the overall cost, particularly the investment management expenses on page 129. And particularly the investment management expenses, 3 lines in the middle of the table. The change seems to be because we have some investment managers that are working on a performance related base here, I think. Morgan Stanley.
Yes.
But that fund is going to be moved into a Border to Coast one, which isn't performance related at all. And all that seems to happen is that the performance related fees that Morgan Stanley presumably earned for performing properly move into Border to Coast without that sort of element. So I just wondered, why is it because none of the Border to Coast ones are performance related at all, which is probably going to be the case. And I just wondered, why that is the case, because I mean, to a certain extent, we've got some degree of protection at the moment with the investment managers. If they don't perform, they don't get paid. Whereas Border Coast seems to get paid whether it performs or not.
So Border to Coast aren't actually, they're selecting managers and they don't take a performance fee. They will, however, have a high hurdle rate to meet to try and to perform as we expect. Some of the underlying managers within that may have performance elements within their fees, but they aren't a direct performance fee that we pay. So the difference at the moment is we do that. The value of
the difference is that if our managers or the Border to Coast managers get the performance that's required, there's no real penalty at all. They still get paid.
they still get paid, and the fees aren't.
Stanley wouldn't.
Morgan Stanley will still get paid. They just won't get the additional element.
Yes.
And the fees that we have, the fees that Border to Coast charge will be much less than Morgan Stanley's base fee without performance, and exceptionally less once you take performance off. I'll let just Claire add as to how the budget itself has been calculated.
There's £1,000 that sort of goes forward with the changes, as opposed to the 1,500 we're paying this current year, this next year. So you could say it's a bit cheaper.
It potentially will be cheaper. I do think it's worth noting though that at Border to Coast they do have a budget within their staffing costs for performance related pay. So we, again, as Joe said, we don't see that on the face of it. We pay a management fee, and that's based on our AUM, which is with Border to Coast. It really is sort of a change in presentation.
In effect, when you say performance related pay on their staffing costs,
Yeah.
that's their bonuses that they pay.
Yes, it's wider than just performance on running
Right,
a
just
particular.
that would be just to do with the performance of the actual funds that they manage. Done all the relevant training, and they're getting all the ticks in their HR boxes and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, it's a balanced scorecard on how they get any additional pay over and above their base, which includes lots of different things and is open to all of the staff at Border to Coast, not just those that manage the money directly.
I was just going back to the previous items, where we never seem to be able to meet the benchmark, in terms of overall performance. So I just wondered, if what we can do to, G things up a bit.
So that's, you kind of have to break that down to look at individual managers, because some managers are meeting the benchmark and meeting their target, and others have not. I think we've discussed regularly the issues with the Global Equity Alpha Fund at Border to Coast, where lots has been done, and they came and they explained in December what was being done. Some of those changes that they've talked about they're underway at the moment, actually. So every single manager is looked at in detail and monitored, and as over the coming year, 2 years, everything will be going to Border to Coast, and that monitoring will all be done through the team at Border to Coast. But it's nothing to do with whether I think that if you look into the statistics have shown that performance related fees don't generally make a manager perform differently, maybe slightly for some of these big hedge funds, but generally it doesn't make any difference to the outcome of the performance. It's just a different way of managing the fee
You'd
structure.
expect that, overall, because you can't do it all the time to a certain extent, or you wouldn't be in business, you'd have retired by a long time ago if you could guarantee to do that. And there'll be pros and cons as you go through, your investment strategies and over the years to a certain extent. But over the past 5 years, we don't seem to have met the benchmark in terms of fund value.
Yeah, I think when we bought it,
So I mean, we're still making, we're still in,
yeah,
we're still
not
in,
across all periods.
we're still in profit, but
Yeah.
as long as it's not going down, I suppose everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah.
But we could have perhaps been better.
It absolutely could. I think sometimes it's worth looking at the absolute performance rather than the relative as well, though, because if we're getting 10%, 8% per annum, that's that's double what the actuary requirements were, which were 4% at the last thing. So sometimes it's worth looking at absolute returns as well as relative. But I feel that the committee do hold our managers to account. The discussions that were had at the December meeting and would have been had again at the April meeting had it not been cancelled with the fixed income side to understand the performance and understand sometimes why the benchmarks over a short time period may not be appropriate. So in looking at the multi-asset credit fund, for example, we've had those discussions previously about a cash plus benchmark at times with bonds will not, with a multi-asset credit will not work. So it's looking in further detail at those individual benchmarks against individual managers within a multi-manager approach. But I think the only reassurance I can say is that, as a committee and as officers of the fund working with Border to Coast, we do a lot of monitoring. There's a lot of discussion and meetings, and where things are going along for a period of time, because obviously we are long-term investors. So we do look at how they are going to be addressed and question Border to Coast quite intensely across the whole Border to Coast partnership.
My view, that things have changed considerably since we moved to Border to Coast, and our ability to quiz and question as a committee, particularly, has changed significantly. We used to, and indeed, how we invested the money, through our managers, has changed quite an awful lot. So I've raised these concerns before, but it seems to be it's more difficult than it was working through the pooling arrangements. And my concern is that, it's whatever it is, 1 hour to go in terms of concerns, is that if we move into the bigger pooling arrangements, it becomes even more difficult because our ability to do the sort of things that perhaps we would wish to do as a committee in terms of raising these sorts of questions and quizzing people becomes more difficult because the pooling arrangements are bigger, the joint committee is bigger or is reformed in some sort of way, with a super committee as opposed to the arrangements we have at the moment or whatever it is. So that's why I raised it, and that's why I keep on saying those sorts of things. It won't be for me to worry about it much longer.
No, and we note your concerns. However, obviously, we are required within regulations to pool. That is out of our hands and moving further and further out of our hands with the Fit for the Future consultation. I think the main assurance I can give is that as officers and as the officer operations group with Border to Coast, we have been working quite a lot over the past 18 months about how can we improve that oversight, how can we have more of an input into what Border to Coast are doing where we're able to, because they're an FCA regulated company, so that does stop us with some things. But we are working very hard as officers to ensure whatever happens to Border to Coast, whether we double in numbers, whether we get 2 new funds, whether we remain the same, we have got the strongest possible oversight into not just the investments, but into also how the company is managed and run. So the Joint Committee have their role. One of the things that's being looked at and was discussed at Joint Committee this week was perhaps reviewing the remit of the Joint Committee to ensure that that's really clear and they're adding the value that they can to be able to bring back to pension funds. So I can't change what we are required to do by government. So I can note your concerns, but I can't change what we have to do.
I accept a lot of this is a consequence of central government changes, but it does work to a significant extent. That responsibility rests with this committee, but the authority that this committee has seems to get further and further away So anything that you can do to ensure that, you know, the committee does seem to be joining its own destiny to a great extent in terms of its responsibilities to the Lineage Pension Fund, I think would be very welcome. I would expect, because otherwise, you know, I'm not totally sure why people would want to be a member of this committee.
I think the only thing I can add to that is, you
I'm
know,
not totally sure I would want to be on this committee if I had sought re-election and was elected, which is pity because I quite enjoy it. I did enjoy it. But
the key role on the committee has changed and will probably continue to change. And as I say, that is, we will have to adapt as we are required to. But the key decision, which we have said before, is actually in setting that strategic asset allocation. That is what actually accounts for the majority of the return to the fund. That will remain with the Pensions Committee. The actual detail of the implementation will go to Borders to Coast. Government's suggestion that professionalises those implementation decisions and they sit with those that have the best knowledge and ability to do that is what government are saying as to why that move is happening. So the key role as far as investments is concerned, because obviously on the Pensions Committee, it's much wider than just investments. It's the most critical thing is the committee is responsible for ensuring that our scheme members are getting their pensions correctly and on time. So the strategic asset allocation will remain with the committee.
even that, Joe, is a bit limited because it's what we can actually invest in terms of the funds that are being operated and being created by Border to Coast. I mean, if I was a Lincolnshire pension fund made a real significant case to the committee members here in the future, we must invest in a significant amount of our funds in rearming Britain because of the threats that face us. I doubt very much if that could be actually put into practice, because I doubt very much if there is that sort of fund available to invest in.
I can't repeat anything other than I've already having that, you know, we work within the boundaries that we are given, but we ensure that as officers, as you know, we bring to the committee as much information as we can, and as officers, we're ensuring we're doing as much oversight and scrutiny of the decisions that Border to Coast are making and how they're investing as we can, working with the joint committee as well. So I don't really think there's anything more I can add, I'm afraid.
I don't think that's more.
Thank you, Mark. Many principles. Thank you. Eddie?
Come back, look, I was going to, but Chairman. As you know, on behalf of the committee, I'm appointed to go to Border to Coast and I was there on Tuesday. So, and I have to rebut you a little bit, Mark, because we always say if you've got any questions to ask Border to Coast from committee, you pass them to me and I will ask them on your behalf.
You just only just thought of this, so I'm afraid you to take to your committee.
I'm not going back this afternoon, so. But I did bring up questions on your behalf anyway. Well, one anyway, which was my concern about how the pooling might end up. And of course, that will be a government diktat anyway, and we'll be forced to do whatever they want us to do. And that could significantly reduce the amount of pools from 8 down to whatever. And how that would work geographically and how it would work with taking over different assets, etc., from individual funds rather than taking over a whole pool. We didn't get anywhere with that because obviously, as I said, it will be a government. But I still impress on you. I mean, I am standing for re-election, and if I am here, I hope to continue going to Border to Coast. And I was still impressing all the committee, all of us, to actually put the questions in writing, and it will be asked on your behalf, and the answers will be fed back to you in writing and brought up at the committee meeting. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief because it relates to Councillor Strangle's point. I think the problem that it's been alluded to is far bigger than the Border to Coast. I think it's actually a problem in the direction we're being forced, which I appreciate nothing anybody in this room can do about. I think that is actually the problem that has been alluded to before Councillor Strangle spoke, that we are being forced down a hole. And as Joe said, we still have responsibility of the investments, but as has been said, we're told how to invest, what to invest in, but it must be pooled, it must be this, it must be this. So we are essentially, Chairman, from the way it looks to me, we're being left holding the baby, but we're told how to rock it to sleep. But if it starts crying, we get the blame, basically, Chairman. And it's I'll use the old adage I always use. we're told which egg we have to suck, and now we're being told how to suck the egg. And I think that's what's being alluded to, Sharon. I can't see that getting any better, unfortunately. And Mark's alluded to those concerns exceedingly eloquently, so I won't repeat them. But I can only see that becoming an even more entrenched and intransigent situation. And it's, I mean, I wasn't here before before the ability to hire managers was gone, so I've never experienced that. But even in the short time I have been on the committee chairman, I've seen how things have changed. And I share the concerns that have been expressed. It's not with how necessarily Borders to Coast work, but it's what we're being asked to do that's the issue, which is what I think was being raised that Councillor Allen was raising. It isn't really a question that Councillor Strangle or yourself can ask Borders to Coast, because it's something we're being told to do. And I don't know what the solution is, short of making representations to all parties and express those concerns, and whether they'll be taken up is anybody's guess. I doubt it, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just come back on that. Not at the meeting on Tuesday, but the previous one, I did bring up that this committee had gone up to Leeds for our meeting. We had two parts. Meeting was in one part, and the other part was Borders to Coast taking this committee through what they do, etc. And it has been agreed by them that after the election, obviously it could be a different committee, parts of it anyway, that invitation is still there to go to Leeds. And I think that's important to go, because then you're face to face with the very people that perhaps when I say criticizing, what I'm saying is you're constructively criticizing, but then you get the response from the horse's mouth. And I think that is important. Now, I'm sure Joe will set it all up after the elections are all over.
Good.
Yeah, Chairman, I hope it was considered to be a constructive criticism, because I'm not blaming our own officers, and I'm not really blaming council, although I should think being an officer at Borders to Coast, trying to react to all the various different pressures that come from your joint committee, its political balance must be quite difficult. It is more to do with the way that we're being forced into going about our activities. But I do worry that, at the end of the day, the responsibility rests with this committee, and our authorities is getting less and less. And you can't have responsibility without authority.
If I can just come back on Councillor Strangle's point, we do have a date that we're planning with Borders to Coast for November. We've actually taken it outside of committee structure, because I think last time with having a committee meeting, as well as it didn't actually allow the time the committee might have liked to be able to meet all the various parties at Borders to Coast and spend that time there. So we are looking at a day trip to Leeds in November to meet with, across all the teams, the compliance team, the investments team, the RI team, the customer relations team. So meet across the whole, but actually spend a day rather than trying to squeeze in a committee meeting and then some sessions with them. So that will be held in November with whoever comes back to the pensions committee going forwards.
Seems a good point. Something to bring through there today. I think the more involvement by getting Borders to Coast, although it's not, you just gain a little bit more knowledge and confidence that it's working well. But there's several of us been here when we have had investors here, and we've roasted them, we've interrogated them, and it's always
We have
worked
the
out.
authority, Chairman, to effectively remove them,
Yeah, we have to.
which we can't do.
But then we must then rely on Borders to Coast to do it. Good, thanks for that. So we will have a little vote on this, because we are here to approve the Lincolnshire Pension Fund business plan for the next 3 years. So if we can raise our hands, please, to approve that. Nothing against that. Lovely, thank you very much. Now we'll go on to the general item 9, the annual report and account 24-25. We've got two gents over there, and I'll ask Claire to just introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The report covers the preparation of the pension fund annual report and accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2025 and the statutory deadlines that sit alongside that. The report also brings the final external audit report for 23-24 and an early reflections paper setting out audit risks for the 24-25 audit. KPMG representatives will cover these documents later in this item. The report has a couple of recommendations that the committee note the changes required to the annual report and accounts and the statement of accounts for 24-25, that you approve the statement of accounting policies, which is set out as Appendix A and will be used for the preparation of the accounts for this year, and note the update from the external auditor. The guidance used to prepare the annual report, you may remember, was updated in April 2024, and this guidance applies fully to the annual report for 24-25, with best endeavours for last year's annual report. In preparing last year's, we were able to comply with the majority of the new guidance, with the exception of some of the areas within the administration area. We've been working with West Yorkshire to ensure full compliance with the guidance for this year, and I think we've got every confidence that those KPIs which are required will be delivered to us and will be included within this year's annual report. In terms of preparation of the accounts element, there haven't been any changes to accounting standards or guidance set out in the Code of Practice, which will affect the pension fund, and therefore the accounting policies and the accounts will look very similar to those seen last year. If we turn to look at the dates, there are two key dates for publishing the annual report and the accounts information, and the annual report must be published by the 1st of December, and the pension fund accounts combined with the county council accounts must be published in draft for public inspection by the 1st of July. We don't anticipate any issues in achieving either of these deadlines and are actually working with the county council to publish draft accounts by the 31st of May, rather than the end of June, which is required by the regulations. You looked at me very surprisingly. So sorry. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report before I hand over to colleagues from KPMG to take us through their elements of the paper.
Questions to begin with?
And I'll pass over to Mihal and Mohammed to go through their final report for 23-24 and then the audit reflections paper for the 24-25 audit.
Thank you, Claire. Morning, members. I'm Mehul Agarwal, Senior Manager with KPMG and Lead Engagement Manager on this audit. The prior year is currently. Alongside me, I have Mohammed, who is the in charge on this audit. I want to first of all thank the officers at Lincolnshire Pension Fund for their cooperation during the previous year audit. I'm hoping for similar cooperation in the current year audit. The final report that we have produced here for the prior year audit is consistent to what we had previously shared in October meeting. There are no changes except that just confirming the fact that we have issued an unqualified opinion we had indicated previously. If there's any questions around the previous year's final report, I'm happy to take them now. Otherwise, I can go towards the early reflection document.
I have a question, Chairman, but I've said it before. I just want to repeat it again, that we shouldn't underestimate how good it is that the Lincolnshire accounts are up to date and fully audited. There's a lot of councils that's not in that position, and once you get, those delays, that has knock-on effects year on year on year. So the fact that Lincolnshire's accounts are fully up to date and fully audited with an unqualified opinion doesn't want to be underestimated. And I think we should pass our thanks on to all the officers to have us in that position.
Right,
I'd like to support the comment that's just been made. We have both the council's accounts and the pension accounts to report to audit. then combined with the report to council. And both sets of accounts have dealt very, very properly and very, very robustly. And generally within deadlines, and certainly within dates that are far more often far better than other councils who can be a year behind us or two sets of accounts behind us. So I think it does show that irrespective of any comments that I do make, we are seriously engaged with proper reporting procedures and policies, and that shows in the accounts and the comments that we get on the accounts.
Any more comments? Claire, anything else?
Nothing on that yet, but I think Neil will take you through the plan. for
Carry on.
2040.
Okay then.
Thank you, Chair. So post completion of prior year audit, we have held various meetings with the officers. And though we are yet to conclude on planning and risk assessment for year end 2025, we have particularly reflected on our experience of prior year audit, and therefore presenting before your committee today an early reflection of audit risk planning materiality, currently tentative audit timetable, and expected fees from our audit. This report is included from page 201 to 211 in the agenda for your reference. I'll quickly talk through our report and we'll be happy to take any questions from members afterwards. So page 203 to page 205 of our report, we have noted our key risks from the audit and the changes from prior year. Consistent from what we had seen in prior year, significant risk area will only be in relation to management override of control. This is the requirement of auditing standards, and there is no change in those requirements. So we are currently having management override of control still as a significant risk. With regards to investment, we have noted no change in the risk related to completeness, existence, accuracy, and valuation. The key reason for no change is firstly, there is no significant change currently in funds composition, nature, and associated risk. Secondly, based on our external market analysis as well, we have not noted any special events which may lead to volatility in funds investment performance. In summary, the risk on these balances is still not significant. However, given the size and nature of these investments as compared to the financial statement, we do still audit these balances considering a higher risk continuum. We have preliminarily decided to reduce the risk continuum on contributions and benefit payments, which though remain material. However, based on our risk assessment, we do not note any uncertainty, complexity, or material risk of errors. Having said this, we are yet to conclude on our risk assessment procedures, and we will inform the committee about it, the final update when we submit our planning document. Consistent to prior year, we will continue to involve our actuarial specialist to review funds actuarial position, key assumptions selected by actuarial specialist, and special events that has occurred during the period. And hence the risk on funds actuarial position has also remained unchanged. Page 206 and 207 of our report, we have documented our rebuttal of fraud risk due to expenditure and revenue. This is again consistent with prior year, as we do not identify any subjectivity on these areas or any fraud risk factors to further test these as a fraud risk. Page 208 of our report, we have discussed the approach towards audit materiality, which is taken at currently 1% of total assets of prior year. However, we will be reassessing these materiality figures again if there is a significant change in total asset number at year end March 2025. Currently, those numbers are approximately showing a materiality level of 34 million. in line with the timetable that Claire highlighted, we also have disclosed our audit timelines on page 209. Subsequent to this meeting, we will be finalizing our audit planning and risk assessment in April. The field work is expected to take place in June and July 2025 once we have the draft accounts. We plan to provide the committee with our audit findings in September, October 2025. And then, of course, the financial statements are expected to be signed in line with County Council's financial statements before the December deadline. Just the last one now on the fees as well. Page 210, we have given the current summary of fees. Just to confirm that these fees numbers for current year are those that are agreed with PSAA and includes the changes in auditing standards for which a fee variation was raised last year separately. I'm happy to take any questions from members for the current year approach.
Questions on that? Yes, any more about Craig?
Nothing else from me, thank you.
So, the gentlemen are completing their attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman.
Sorry, Mark. Sorry, there is a question.
My very last question. There's no reason why the accounts for forthcoming years go as well as previous ones. Have you got the resources that you need to actually meet deadlines and take the work and meet deadlines? Or is the industry still having problems in terms of providing resources of a suitable caliber?
Thank you. I think just from the perspective of, first of all, Lincolnshire, the officers are very good at providing us the information that we need, so we're able to plan our resources in advance, particularly to meet the relevant milestones. However, yes, we do see some problems with resourcing on those engagements, particularly when there are delays in provision of information or when there were unsigned documents previously available. But yes, I think that the linkage side, I think is, the team there is doing its utmost to keep resources in place and to ensure that they've got the bandwidth that's required. It's more to do with the KPMG resources. So from KPMG's perspective, of course, so we have, I think I've been investing a lot in building our bandwidth in prior years. After COVID as well, before we took the entire PSA contract as well, there was the full planning of resources. We usually plan for our resourcing 1 year in advance. So currently we are planning for resources for 2026 year-end audit. And similarly for current year's audit, the planning was done last year. And if we see any shortfalls, when we do that planning, we of course make sure that those are filled in well ahead of time. It's 9 months or 6 months ahead of time before we start the audit. So of course, because we have these forward planning tools available within KPMG, we are able to provide those services on time. Of course, yes, I mean, the issue happens when there's a delay in information or when there are significant delays in information, provision of information. So there may be delays from our end to make sure that stuff like that. It's more to do with the information you get out of your clients, and you don't have any problems in terms of getting what you need out of our team at Lincolnshire, which is very good news.
I was just going to add to that. I think this is obviously the KPMG's first year that they've completed. We've been able to complete within the timescales we've required. They've had to do some extra work this year because it's their first year, so they've been checking all of the balances on the investments and on the pension side. We'd also moved to the new Business World system, so there's quite a lot of work they do checking all the data transfer over there, which is work they won't have to do in their second year of their contract. Steve's comment about the fact that we've had a kind of unblemished history coming into their contract has been significantly beneficial for KPMG, I think, and the fact that we're on the LCC side and the pension side, we're very responsive, I believe, to questions, and they have been in return, I think. So we've fed back to KPMG about some of the nuances around using the Pension Centre of Excellence, and that's caused us some problems in terms of some delays, I think, and additional questions that come a bit after the time we expected. But that's all been put back, so hopefully we'll improve during the course of the 24/5 audit.
So the teamwork works well and it pays dividends.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Anything else on this one? We're all pretty happy with the way things are moving. So we've got recommendations on page 5. I'll read them out. The committee note changes required in the annual report and accounts and statement of accounts 24/25. 2, approve the statement of accounting policy, appendix A, for use in preparing the local government pension scheme accounts for the financial year ending 31st March 2025. And note the external auditor's final report on the 23/24 accounts and annual report and the early reflections document, the 24/25 audit. We've got an approval in here, so if we can go, please, if we're happy with everything. Anybody again? Cool. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10 is the consideration of sent information when we go into closed session. I'll just read this out so we're all clear. In accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the following agenda item has not been circulated to the press and public on the grounds that it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of section 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. Press and public may be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of this item of business. So what we will do now, we will take if we could take a vote on that, please, that we do accept that. That's lovely. And what we will do now is Thomas will go offline now and we will convene for 10 minutes afterwards. So the gents and public can leave, and any councillors that are not with us next year may leave as well. And then it's actually